Chapter 8. The Committee System. The General Assembly is too large and its time is too limited for every member to study each bill in detail. The committee system, required by the Constitution, has been developed to screen legislative proposals and decide which deserve consideration by the whole House. There are several types of committees, each filling a different function. Standing committees. During each session, committees established by rule to handle legislation on a particular subject are known as standing committees. All bills and resolutions having the effect of law must be referred to a standing committee for study. During the interim, standing committees of the Senate join with standing committees of the House to form interim joint committees. Each interim joint committee is considered to be a subcommittee of the Legislative Research Commission. They meet to conduct appropriate business, including preparation of legislation to be introduced at the next regular session. The General Assembly uses various standing committees in the Senate and House of Representatives, with proportional partisan representation, as provided by the rules of each House. In the Senate, the size of committees is limited to 12 members, except for Appropriations and Revenue, Education, Transportation, and Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection. There is no limit on the number of committee members in the House.
Meetings and hearings. The chair of a committee supervises its work. Under the rules, the Committee on Committees, in conference with committee chairs, is required to schedule a definite time and place for regular weekly meetings. This schedule is posted and published in the legislative record and the weekly calendar. The committee may call special meetings in addition to the regularly scheduled meetings. LRC staff keeps a record of the attendance of the members at meetings. Rules of the House or Senate must be observed in committee as far as they are applicable. In the House of Representatives, committee chairs are required to announce at least 3 days in advance which bills may be considered at the next meeting of the committee. This is known as posting of bills. The posting requirement may be waived under a suspension of rules. The Senate has no posting requirement. Public hearings may be held on bills when the committee deems that advisable or at the request of interested citizens. The director of the Legislative Research Commission is required to assign secretarial and professional staff to each committee.
Reports. Standing committees report when called in the regular order of business. The clerk reads reports of standing committees according to the regular order of business. A bill reported favorably is given its first reading. An unfavorable or expressing no opinion report stops further action on the bill, unless a constitutional majority sustains a motion to advance it to the first reading. Minority reports signed by dissenting committee members may also be submitted when measures are reported out of committee. The vote of a majority of members elected is required to substitute the minority report for the committee report. The committee's report is always read before the minority report is read. Committee reports usually determine a bill's chances of passage. Nearly half of all bills introduced each session die in committee. The General Assembly seldom overrides the decisions of its committees and seldom votes to call a bill from committee.
Rules Committee. The Rules Committee acts throughout the session as a traffic control committee by posting to the orders of the day for third reading and consideration by the chamber bills having received 2 readings. In maintaining an orderly flow of legislation, the Rules Committee must, within 5 legislative days of receiving any bill or resolution, either post it to orders of the day or refer it back to a standing committee. The majority floor leader acts for the Rules Committee in calling up bills and resolutions and is recognized by the presiding officer for that purpose. The Speaker of the House is chair of the House Rules Committee, and the Speaker pro tempore serves in the absence of the Speaker. The Senate President is chair of the Senate Rules Committee, and the President pro tempore serves in the absence of the President. Members of the respective Rules Committees are made up of various legislative leaders. Committee on Committees. The Committee on Committees of each House appoints all standing and procedural committees and fills vacancies thereon. The committee's discretion on appointments is limited by the requirement of proportionate party representation, the limitation on a committee's size, and the strict requirements on numbers of members' assignments. Membership of the Committee on Committees consists of various legislative leaders. The Committee on Committees appoints all standing and special committees, refers all bills and joint and concurrent resolutions to the proper standing committee, and supervises the employment and performance of all employees for the particular chamber.
Enrollment Committee. In each chamber, the Enrollment Committee is responsible for determining the correctness of legislation that has passed both chambers and is ready for signature by the presiding officer. Conference Committees. On occasion, different versions of the same basic piece of legislation are passed by each chamber of the General Assembly. In this case, a conference committee may be appointed to reconcile the differences when each house refuses to modify its position. This committee contains members from both houses, appointed by the Committee on Committees in each chamber. Members are usually chosen from those most interested in the measure. If the conference committee reaches an agreement, a conference report is prepared and voted on in each house. This report may be accepted or rejected, but it cannot be amended from the floor. If the report is rejected, the chamber may give special instructions or another conference committee may be appointed to attempt to break the deadlock. If a conference committee becomes deadlocked, it may be supplanted by a committee on free conference, which is not limited to the issue in controversy, and may offer additional amendments to the bill as portions of its report, consistent with the rules of each chamber.
Committee of the Whole. A chamber may resolve itself into a committee of the whole to debate freely a measure or to consider amendments to a measure. The committee of the whole takes no final action but makes recommendations back to the full chamber. Special committees. During the course of a session, each chamber may appoint various special committees charged with gathering information on a particular matter and presenting a report. Special committees usually go out of existence after presentation of their reports. These committees may be created by resolution or motion, which describes the purpose and selection process. Each house may prescribe rules for the committee.
Chapter 9. Officers and Employees. Leadership is an important factor in the orderly operation of a legislative assembly. Each house elects officers to preside over its sessions, as required by the Constitution. Presiding Officers. Presiding officers call the House or Senate to order and preside over each day's session. They preserve order and decorum in the chamber and may order the floor cleared at any time. They recognize members to speak and may speak to points of order in preference to members. Presiding officers decide all points of order and matters of procedure, subject to appeal to the membership. They sign all writs or other processes and sign all measures passed by the General Assembly. President of the Senate and Speaker of the House. The Senate elects one of its members as President, and the House elects one of its members as Speaker. The President of the Senate and Speaker of the House are the presiding officers of their respective chambers. Both have the right to vote and may leave the chair to participate in debate. The Speaker is chair of the House Committee on Committees and the House Rules Committee. The President is chair of the Senate Committee on Committees and the Senate Rules Committee. The President may designate any senator to preside in the absence of both the President and the President pro tem. The President and Speaker are customarily chosen from the majority party of their respective chambers. Both serve as co-chairs of the Legislative Research Commission.
President pro tempore and Speaker pro tempore. The Senate elects one of its members as President pro tem, and the House elects one of its members as Speaker pro tem. These officers preside in their respective chambers in the absence of the President or Speaker or when authorized by the President or Speaker to perform the duties of the chair. The President pro tem and Speaker pro tem serve as members of the Legislative Research Commission. Majority and minority floor leaders. Each political party chooses its floor leader for each house. The job of the floor leader is to expedite business by giving priority to measures deemed important or significant by the party. The majority floor leader calls bills from orders of the day and holds the floor much of the time that bills are under consideration. Floor leaders of both parties in both houses are members of the Legislative Research Commission. Majority and minority caucus chairs. Each party also selects a caucus chair for each house. The caucus chair presides over the caucus and sees that members of the party are on the floor when an important bill is under consideration or when an important vote is probable. Caucus chairs of both parties in both houses are members of the Legislative Research Commission. Majority and minority whip. In both houses, each party selects a member to serve as whip, whose duties are to assist the floor leaders and caucus chairs in getting members on the floor for key votes. Whips of both parties in both houses are members of the Legislative Research Commission. Leadership offices and staff. Both chambers have made offices with staff assistants available to the leadership of each party. For matters of partisan consideration, these offices often can be of assistance to the members, subject to the guidelines of the ethics law. Their services are available during both the interim and the session.
Employees. Constitutional employees. The Constitution authorizes each House to elect certain employees whose duties and compensation are set by statute and rule. The smooth functioning of the General Assembly depends largely on the efficient operation of the office of the Chief Clerk. In the Senate, this officer records and files the daily journal, directs the engrossing of bills, reads and compares enrolled bills, calls the roll, and records the voting. The Chief Clerk endorses on each bill and resolution a brief note of action taken, and keeps a register showing the status of each measure. The Chief Clerk is aided by an assistant clerk and an enrolling clerk. Many of the functions and duties of the House Clerk have been transferred by rule to the staff of the Legislative Research Commission, which now performs various duties relating to the flow of legislation. Each House has a sergeant-at-arms, who clears the floor of persons not authorized to be present, compels the attendance of members sent for by the House, directs the delivery of mail, and directs the pages who deliver messages, run errands for members, and carry bills to the clerk's desk. The doorkeeper of each House excludes all persons not entitled to the privilege of the floor. The House has 2 cloakroom keepers, and the Senate has 1, who care for articles left with them by members. Each House also employs a janitor.
Other employees. Other employees are necessary to the General Assembly's work. A payroll clerk, attached to the Legislative Research Commission staff, keeps the financial accounts of the General Assembly, certifies the compensation of members and employees, and pays for supplies and other expenses. Constitutional and other legislative employees are under the jurisdiction of either the Commission or the Chief Clerk, who reports to the Committee on Committees. Most legislative employees have served several sessions. They know a great deal about procedure and precedent and can be of great help to members, especially first-term legislators. Legislative interns. During each regular session in an even-numbered year, approximately 20 college undergraduate students are selected to participate in the legislative intern program. Interviews and final selection occur in the spring of odd-numbered years. These students receive a full semester of credit toward their degrees by virtue of such participation, and at the end of the session may be assigned research projects to complete their semester of work. They receive a stipend and live in or commute to Frankfurt during the entire semester. Legislative interns are assigned to serve the standing committees, under the direct supervision of the appropriate staff members of the Legislative Research Commission.